But Abu Hamza, of course, he's in Belmarsh at the moment. He's in the process of being deported to America, where he is guaranteed a fair trial. Irony there, one of the many comic tools we'll be using tonight. So I was driving past the Finsbury Park Mosque on the 9th of December, the day after the 9th of November, and it was all kicking off outside. There's Muslim demonstrators on one side of the street complaining about the reprisals they've suffered, police in the middle trying to keep order, and on the other side of the Seven Sisters Road, British National Party members standing near the Arsenal shop, their spiritual home. And they're shouting out, "Send them back! Send the Muslims back to where they came from." Bradford, Wood Green, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, and other British industrial cities which required cheap labour in the 1960s and 70s. And it looked, Glasgow, like there was going to be a full-scale religious race riot. And so I said to the minicab driver, "Stop. Let me out. I can help you."
What, is he gonna fart?
And I got out of the minicab, I pushed through the British National Party blokes, I pushed through the police line, I pushed through the Muslim demonstrators, I ran into the mosque, some guy tried to get me to take my shoes off, I don't know what it was about, there wasn't time, I carried on through it. It was a nice, hospitable gesture, but it was ill-timed. And I ran up the prayer tower to the minaret, where the call to prayer is broadcast out to the faithful of North London. And I snatched the little microphone out of the stand there, and I pulled down my underpants, and I shoved it up my anus. And with a concerted effort of mental and physical willpower, I farted into it. But on that occasion, it didn't really help. In fact, some eyewitnesses to the ensuing carnage were subsequently to suggest that it may have made the situation worse. And my heartfelt message of peace and goodwill to all men was misunderstood. Although I take some comfort in the fact that a similar thing often happened to Jesus. I'm not saying that I am Jesus. That's for you to think about at home. But if I was him, this is the kind of place I would come, isn't it? A simple, humble place. Not the Glasgow Empire. I would come here. But I'm not saying I am Jesus. Not in the current climate. Well, I think there's a kind of European kind of smugness where we look at America's kind of hysterical overreaction to the events of the 9th of November and we go, thanks for that, America. Thanks. You've set us off on a course for the destruction of world civilization as we know it. Thanks for that. Thanks. But you mustn't hate the Americans, right? America is currently the most hated country in the world. Americans don't know that. They don't read or watch news. If they did, they would be unhappy. Osama bin Laden flew planes into the World Trade Center. It was a waste of time. If he'd really wanted to hit America hard where it hurts, he should have carpet-bombed the country with a weapon that Americans would never be able to understand. World Geography examination papers. Shops which don't have the word barn in their name. And the metaphysical concept of shame. But you mustn't hate the Americans. Don't hate them, Glasgow. Americans live in a kind of state of ignorant prelapsarian bliss. They don't know what's going on. And because of that, it can be very relaxing to go to America and watch them. If you go to America and you look at Americans in their natural habitat, the theme park, the shopping mall, the race riot, the high school massacre, And you watch them walking around, looking at colours and shapes and lights and words, sometimes imagining what the words might mean. It's very relaxing, guys. It's like watching carp in a pond in a stately home. Their mouths opening and closing. It's charming. But you mustn't hate the Americans. They're not a naturally curious people. Most Americans do not own passports. They're not a naturally curious people. If you were to lock an American for 60 years in an empty underground bunker which contained nothing except a woolly tea cosy, the American would not even be curious enough to be tempted to see if the tea cosy would make a serviceable hat.
Sure it would.
They're far more likely to arrest the tea cosy and turn it illegally in Guantanamo Bay and then repeatedly anally rape it until such time as it admits that it was actually a member of an Al-Qaeda training cell. Even though at the time of the alleged offence, the tea cosy was actually working as a shop assistant in a branch of Curry's in Wolverhampton. Some laughs there, other people a bit confused. What's he talking about, right? OK, well, again, that's a kind of bit of satire of the fact that some of the British citizens held in Guantanamo Bay were tortured into saying that they'd been in Al-Qaeda camps, even though at the time they were supposed to be there, they were actually working as shop assistants in a branch of Curry's in Wolverhampton. Other people I sense are going, yeah, we know about that. That's not what's confusing us. What's confusing us here in Glasgow is the idea of a tea cosy working as a shop assistant in a branch of Curry's. How could that possibly work? And again, Glasgow, I say to you, I don't know how that would work. But what I say to you is, could a tea cosy working as a shop assistant in a branch of Curry's actually be any less effective than some of the people currently employed there? Hello, I don't know if you can help me. I'm interested in buying one of those iPods. I'm sorry, sir. I won't be able to help you on account of the fact that I am fashioned entirely from colourful wool. Perhaps you'd like to ask one of my colleagues. The cardigan, the mitten, the balaclava helmet.
Balaclava helmet.
And again, you'll notice there are a list of 3 things really they ought comedically to build, but the balaclava helmet was a disappointment. It didn't get the laugh one would be hoping for there. And I knew that was going to happen, right? Because, like I say, I ran this show in Edinburgh for a month last August, and I thought, I'll be honest with you, Glasgow, I thought the balaclava helmet was going to get a big laugh. Ironically, I've been touring this. The only place the balaclava helmet did get a big laugh was in Aldershot, which is a military town, so they probably have a different kind of relationship with it. But on the whole, people don't find it funny. And I was confused, because for me, the balaclava helmet is one of those inherently absurd items. I thought it would be a good topper there, but it never worked. So the first kind of week of the run, the month run, I kept swapping the order around. I was going, perhaps you'd like to talk to one of my colleagues, the balaclava helmet, mitten, cardigan, balaclava helmet, mitten, whatever. And after a week, still nothing, well, it never got any laughs. Then after about 10 days, one of my friends in the audience, the actor Kevin Eldon, who you may remember from Channel 4's Packing 'Em In the early 90s, his best, the best work he did. And I said to him, why do you think that isn't working? And he said, well, the problem is, all the items in your list are made of wool. And the tea cosy has already said to the customer that it won't be able to help him on account of the fact that it is made from wool. So for the tea cosy to suggest to the customer that he seeks assistance from other exclusively woolen items, you know, it simply adds insult to injury. It makes the situation worse. So I said, yeah, I never thought of that. What shall I do? And he said, well, just think of 3 things that aren't made of wool and you'll be all right. And I thought, yeah, I will, but I won't write them down, I'll come out every night and I'll just make them up. I'll exist in the moment. I'll trust it to chance. I'll improvise, like Eddie Izzard pretends to do. And when you've tried to do it, you realise why he doesn't. It's hard. It's hard to do. It's much easier to just go in every sentence and give the illusion of spontaneity. So I came out. Let it go. So I came out the first night. I went, yeah, perhaps you'd like to talk to one of my colleagues. And I said, the stick, the wood. And then I said, the toaster. And again, there was no laugh. So I thought, why's that? And I went home and I thought, yes, because the problem is the toaster is an electrical item, and the people are thinking, is that working in Currys or is it for sale there? Yeah, but I was chasing the problem down. Basically, I realised I needed 3 things that were neither electrical nor woolen, right? But it's quite hard to think of that. Sir, think of a thing.
Weather vane.
Weather vane.
The act of cunnilingus.
Weather vane, the act of cunnilingus, and...
A banana.
What?
A banana.
A banana. Weather vane, the act of cunnilingus, and banana. Well, admittedly, those are quite good. They're not electrical nor woolen. Weather vane, banana, good. The act of cunnilingus is particularly good because that takes us into an area where concepts are working in a shop. It's good. It's certainly... I was in Aspen, Colorado 2 weeks ago. In America, you beat them hands down. The American audience, their first 2 suggestions were a scarf and a kettle. Woolen and electrical. Straight. Although, to be fair, this wasn't the part of the set they liked least. After the 911 opening, a lot of the American audience have been shaken off in Aspen. And if anything, arguably the New York warm-ups were worse. It's weird, because about 2 weeks into Edinburgh, some kid emailed me and he went, you know that bit you do about people being so bored they wear tea cozies as hats? I went, yeah. He goes, there's a Spike Milligan or a Billy Connolly joke like that, he said, from 1972. So basically,
Connolly.
I must have kind of remembered that and copied it. So that bit, the first half of it is plagiarised, and the second half doesn't really work. But I was making a number of kind of crass generalisations about Americans, though. I don't really believe any of them. And I did it for comic effect. And I don't understand how anyone can have a kind of generalised view about another nation or race. I certainly don't. And I think it's because I'm different to a lot of you. I'm not necessarily better, but I'm different. And I'm better, let's face it. And I think it's because I feel a little bit kind of removed from your human society, because I'm adopted. I'm an adopted man, and so I'm suspicious of notions of identity or nationhood. For example, I grew up thinking that I was English, right? But about 2 years ago, I found out, and this is true, I found out that my real father is Scottish, right? Which, of course, means that I'm Scottish, because as you'll know, Scottishness is passed on through the male genes, like a disability, and it overwhelms all female chromosomes, and that's why there are no Scottish women. Oh, there's no Scottish women. Not it. There are men in kilts, but that's just nature trying to find its own level. And if a Scottish man wants to breed, of course, you have to travel south of the border. Normally, you get as far as a major English railway station, get off the train, lie down in a gutter drunk, and hope some pollen lands on you. And I can say that, remember, because technically I am Scotch. Yeah, Scotch, yeah. Genetically, if not culturally. But I think that, even though I grew up thinking I was English, I think I always knew that I was one of you, because I'd go into school Monday mornings and people would go, "Did you see the sport at the weekend, Stu? The brilliant sport that all men must like, with England winning in it. It was good, wasn't it?" And I go, "No, in fact, it filled me with feelings of revulsion and disgust." Then they go to me, what about the rich tapestry, the tableau of English culture and history? Do you take no pleasure in that? And I go, no, in fact, the whole notion of English culture just makes me feel kind of mentally, physically and spiritually bereft. And they go, what about the English language, the tongue of Shakespeare, Shelley, Blake, Churchill? Does that not stir some residual national pride in you? And I go, no, in fact, whenever I hear an English accent, I have to be physically sick. And I would hear my own voice answering their question, and I would start vomiting as I spoke. So as a child, I hated being English. And yet, conversely, I always harboured secret cravings for shortbread, offal and heroin. Something like that. You know, deep-fried heroin, if I could get it. With sauce. Heroin supper, $2.95. But so I think I always knew Glasgow. Can hardly believe this is happening. I always knew that I was a Scotch man, and so I always knew. Yeah, Scottish. Thank you for correcting me. Sorry.
They don't like Scotch.
You know, it was an error I made on purpose for comic effect, and I'm glad that there's so little trust in me in the room that people are going, he's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know. He's insane. What's he talking about? He hasn't done the most basic research. But even despite that, I always knew that I was Scottish in my heart, in my brave heart. I always knew that I was. Okay, shout out if you've seen the film Braveheart. You've all seen it. Shout out. Okay, now you'll know more than any other audience I've played in the last 3 weeks that Braveheart is the shittest film ever made, right? It was directed by the reactionary Catholic bigot Mel Gibson, and it's full of basic fundamental historical errors which insult your race and mine by association, right? Here's just 3 off the top of my head. Firstly, William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, he wasn't some, noble savage living in a mud hut. We all know that. He was a privileged, educated nobleman, right? Secondly, it's not mentioned by Mel Gibson in the film, but there's some evidence to suggest that he actually fought as a mercenary for the English as a teenager. That's conveniently missed out. Thirdly, you know that French princess? He's supposed to have sex with this French princess in the film, you remember? And the implication is that he gets her pregnant and she marries Edward II of England, so it's his kid. Now, she was a real historical figure, that French princess. But at the time of the death of William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, she was only 4 years old. Now, Glasgow, I'm not saying that William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, didn't have sex with her. You know, he probably did. If I look at my own personal background, there's a lot of sexual opportunism involved in it. But, not saying he didn't have sex, he probably did. But if he did, and he did, he definitely did, right? It would have been a far less romantic scene than the one enacted by Mel Gibson in the film Braveheart. It may have happened in a tent, but it would still have been not a romantic scene, because that would have made William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero, a paedophile. A Scottish paedophile. The worst kind of paedophile that there is. Coming at you through a bothy with shortbread on its face. Muttering unintelligible sexual threats in a frankly incomprehensible dialect. But another weird thing about that film is, in it, fine, leave at this point. It gets worse. A man leaving there to go away and think about the idea of a paedophile Braveheart in the privacy of the toilet cubicle. But it's not the other weird thing about that film is that, in it, if you remember, Mel Gibson makes a big deal about the fact that Edward II, the English prince, was gay, right? As if not only did he oppress the Scots, but he did it in a kind of a gay way. Which makes it worse. But the irony is, again, it's not mentioned in the film, that William Wallace, Braveheart, your national hero himself, was actually gay. And No, he was, sir. And we know this from some information that's come to light in the last couple of years. Firstly, about 2 years ago, they found a cache of love letters hidden in a nook at Glamis Castle or somewhere. And the letters were exchanged between William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, and they were full of declarations. They were full of declarations of love and details of their sexual encounters, very vigorous sexual encounters that they had. But that's one thing. Then about a year ago, they found some graffiti on a wall, on an old Scottish wall, on the wall.
That'd be recent, wouldn't it?
On the wall of a broch, actually, which is the Broch of Gurness, which is a real place in the Orkneys. They found it there, and it said the graffiti, which is real, existed. It said, "I am a gay." Signed William Wallace. Braveheart, and the Braveheart bit was in inverted commas, so they knew that meant it was real. It was like a fun nickname, you know, it's like real. So, William Wallace, Braveheart, our national hero, was gay. And you know, when I was talking about this in Edinburgh in the summer, people were going, well, why didn't we know about that? You know, and the reason is because the graffiti and the letters were written in Gaelic, so it wasn't translated. And people are going, well, why wasn't it translated? That's just the ancient language of our nation, of the Scots. Why wasn't it translated? But it wasn't. What Gaelic actually was a very kind of highly evolved form of medieval Scottish homosexual patois. And the clue's in the name, if you look at it, right? Gaelic, that means gay, homosexual gay, and then lich is language or tongue. So Gaelic is literally the language of gays. And, you know, I was booed off at the assembly rooms for saying this in Edinburgh, but it's true, and I don't think I think it's really great that our national hero, William Wallace, was gay, because Scotland's always been a much more progressive, liberally minded, and kind of a nation that's not afraid to show its feminine side. And I think that compared to England, which is a very backward, kind of bigoted place, and I think that it's really good that as we enter the 21st century, one of your national folk heroes can embody a kind of progressive notion of sexual identity. I think that's a really brilliant thing, and I wish that some of the English folk heroes, like King Alfred or Robin Hood or King Arthur, had been gay, but they weren't. And it's only William Wallace, Braveheart, the Scottish one, that definitely was gay. And of course another... Sorry? Someone said Robin Hood was surely, and from they're saying Men in Tights, but of course the Men in Tights edition to the Robin Hood legend was made in the 1980s by Mel Brooks. The facility to make those kind of tights didn't exist in medieval England. If it had done, maybe they would have worn them. I'm sure that a thin dernier tight is an ideal garment for medieval combat, offering as it does no protection whatsoever to the human leg. But of course the other major inaccuracy about that film, of course, is in the Middle Ages there was no such country as Scotland. Scotland was actually invented, as you all know, in 1911 by the McGowan Sweet Company as a way of marketing Highland toffee. Because, of course, traditionally we think toffee's better if it's manufactured at a high altitude.